Hello, it is AO Alina, and I wanted to go over the patch notes with you guys. This is the mid-season patch we're getting for Season 4, Loot Reborn. So let's go over these and see what's coming. So on June 17th, that's when this patch will apply. And they're saying, we greatly appreciate everyone's excitement since the launch of Season 4 and are very happy with the state of the game. The changes in this patch are aimed at buffing classes and builds that are not performing as well as their counterparts. Sorc, please. Druid, please. We are also slightly reducing the difficulty of the pit to ensure that most builds are able to get to tier 60 to get their final tier of masterworking materials. Yes! This is good. All right, so healing potions. The minor healing potion, initial healing increased by 50%. That is something I actually noticed while making a new character for Season 4, is those early potions really feel weak. So I'm glad that they are increasing the healing on them, because I was like, maybe I'm just used to the maxed out potion. But they're buffing these significantly to 200% for strong, great, major, and superior. Strong, greater, my bad. So legendary aspects, aspect of the protector, the barrier cooldown was reduced from 30 seconds down to 20. Mythic unique items, and Dariel's Visage. Poison Nova now spawns on the enemy instead of the player. Poison Nova damage increased by 50%. Ooh, Doombringer. Shadow Explosion damage increased by 100%. Ring of Starless Skies. Maximum stacks of resource cost reduction and bonus damage increased from 4 to 5. This increases the maximum amount of resource cost reduction and bonus damage from 40% multiplicative to 50% multiplicative. Tyrael's Might. The Divine Barrage damage increased by 100%. Let's go. I'm bringing Tyrael's Might back on my Barb. All right, so stat requirements for non-main stats reduced from 90 to 60 per Paragon board. That is huge, because a lot of us were not getting those secondary buffs from the rare nodes and whatnot. Or glyphs. It's just like, oh, you can get this part here, but the secondary part, you need 600 willpower, and you're a barbarian. Good luck. And it's like, this sounds like they're going to be making a big difference there. Per Paragon board. Okay. A class's main stat is the one that increases the damage of all of their skills. For example, Sorc's main stat is Intelligence, so this change affects their rare Paragon nodes that have a threshold bonus for Dexterity and Willpower. The stat requirements to activate any rare node increases for each additional Paragon board you progress through. Some of these nodes that require non-main stats were harder to activate than intended. This change makes it easier to activate these nodes, especially on later Paragon boards. Because a lot of us are like, if I'm a sorc and I don't use willpower or dexterity, I want the boards early on that have those, and later on skill with int. That way I know I'm always going to meet the int requirement. It's just, this is going to help a lot of the troubleshooting I think we're having. It's like we can't figure out how to meet those requirements, and now they're letting us. That's big. So Barbarian, whirlwind damage increased by 15%. Violent Whirlwind damage bonus increased from 30% multiplicative to 35%. Call of the Ancients. Corlix Leap damage increased by 12.5%. Talix Whirlwind damage increased by 20%. And Madoc's Upheaval damage increased by 13%. Prime Call of the Ancients bonus damage increased from 20% multiplicative to 25%. Frenzy damage increased by 8%. Flay. Bleeding damage over time increased by 8%. Flay, guys, it's already up there. Enhanced Flay. Vulnerable duration increased from 3 to 5 seconds. Battle Flay. Bleed damage bonus increased from 10% multiplicative to 15% multiplicative. Combat Flay. Maximum stack amount increased from 4 to 5. Damage reduction increased from 3 to 4%. Buff duration increased from 3 to 6 seconds. Let's go. Flay is going to be topping the charts, even though I'm pretty sure it already is, but let's go. So the passives have been adjusted. Pressure Point. It used to be Lucky Hit, your core skills have up to a 10% chance to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. Now, it's a Lucky Hit, your core and weapon mastery skills have up to a 10% chance to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. And then Tough as Nails, additional thorns as bleeding damage increased from 10% to 15%. You gonna be a Thorns Barb this season? Key passives, Walking Arsenal. Damage per unique source of weapon damage increased from 10% multiplicative to 12% multiplicative. Legendary aspects. Aspect of Tempering Blows. Weapon swaps to activate the effect are reduced from 6 to 5. Okay. Slacking aspect. It previously was Lucky Hit. You have up to a 45 to 60% chance to gain 20 Fury when a Rend deals direct damage to at least one bleeding enemy. So it's pretty limited. Now it is a lucky hit where you have a 45 to 60% chance to gain 20 Fury when a core skill deals direct damage to at least one bleeding enemy. And your maximum Fury is increased by 5 to 20%. So you're no longer locked into using Rend here. That is awesome. Just a core skill. Dust Devil's aspect, Whirlwind Dust Devil damage increased by 100%. Have fun, Barbarians. Aspect of the Relentless Arms Master. Before, you gained 35 to 65% increased Fury generation while all bonuses from the Walking Arsenal key passive are active. Now, you gain 35 to 65% increased Fury generation and 15% reduced Fury cost to your skills while all bonuses from the Walking Arsenal key passive are active. Let's go. And I like how much more detailed these are. It's like they're very specific in the way that they're saying, in the way that they're wording this. So unique items, Gore's Devastating Grips, Whirlwind Explosion damage increased from 25 to 35% of base damage to 40 to 50%. An Ancient's Oath damage increased from 30 to 50% multiplicative to 40 to 60%. All right, interesting. Then we have Druid. Is this going to save Druid? So Spirit Boons, Gift of the Stag. The maximum spirit increased from 20 to 40. Prickle Skin. Thorns amount increased by 100%. Advantageous Beast, it used to be, reduce the duration of control impairing effects by 15%. Now, you gain 15% additive movement speed and 15% additive impairment reduction. Scythe Talons, crit strike chance increased from 5% additive to 10%. Iron Feather, maximum life increased from 14% multiplicative to 20% multiplicative. Swooping Attacks, attack speed increased from 10% additive to 15% additive. Energize. Spirit Restored increased from 20 to 30. Nice. Bolster. Fortify amount increased from 15% to 25% of your maximum life. And Obsidian Slam. Kills required for guaranteed overpower reduced from 20 to 10. That is nice. Okay. So we have skills. Rabies. Poisoning damage increased by 25%. Get your werewolves. Pulverize. Damage increased by 76%. Raging Pulverize. It used to be enemies overpowered by Pulverize are stunned for 3 seconds. Big deal. Now, Pulverize deals 30% multiplicative increased overpower damage. Enemies overpowered by Pulverize are stunned for 3 seconds. Once again, the wording here is very intentional and detailed. There's no confusion. It's to the point there. I really like that. Let's look at the passives. Nature's Fury. Chance to trigger a free skill of the opposite category increased from 30% to 35%. Perfect Storm. Damage bonus increased from 20% multiplicative to 30% multiplicative. Nature's Reach. Damage to distant enemies increased from 3, 6, and 9% multiplicative to 5, 10, and 15% multiplicative. Toxic Claws. Poisoning amount increased from 8, 15 to 23% to 12, 24, and 36% of the skill's base damage. Quick Shift. Maximum damage bonus increased from 6 to 12 to 18% multiplicative to 8 to 16 to 24% multiplicative. Defensive Posture. It used to be increases the amount of Fortify you gain from all sources by 5, 10, to 15% additive. Now, increase the amount of Fortify you gain from all sources by 5, 10, 15% additive, and you gain 3, 6, to 9% damage reduction while fortified. I love that. Okay, then we have Mending, which used to say, while in Werebear form, you receive 6 to 12 to 18% additive additional healing from all sources. Now, while you're in Werebear form, you receive 6 to 12 to 18% additive additional healing from all sources, and you gain 4 to 8 to 12% multiplicative increased life. So they're really buffing Druid here. Like, these seem like little changes, but I feel like just changing a few of these passives the way that they're doing and making some additive things multiplicative, adding additional damage reduction, increase maximum life. This is going to make Druid really do better in the pit. I think they're going to sustain way more because their damage was looking good. At least against bosses. Like Windshear, I like the boss damage on that. Let's see how this changes it. Provocation. Time in Werebear form required for overpower reduced from 24 2016 to 2016 12 seconds. Alright. Legendary aspects. Aspect of Trampled Earth. Landslide damage increased from 50 to 80% multiplicative to 70 to 100% of normal damage. Subterranean aspect. Damage bonus increased from 10 to 25% multiplicative to 15 to 30% multiplicative. Aspect of the Alpha. Werewolf companion damage increased from 85 to 115% multiplicative to 100 to 130% multiplicative. An unsatiated aspect. Shred damage. When cast above 50 spirit, increases from 10 to 25% to 20 to 35%. Paragon time. Constricting Tendrils, legendary node. Damage increased from 120% to 150%. And then the Dominate glyph, damage bonus after an overpower increased from 12% multiplicative to 15% multiplicative. Necromancer time! And we just swapped to Endo's Comfy Mancer build, which we can link in the description here. I wonder how this will affect it, because that build already never dies. I'm very curious how this is going to change. Skirmisher's Sacrifice upgraded. Crit Strike chance bonus increased from 5% additive to 10% additive. Defender's Sacrifice upgrade. Resistance to all elements increased from 20% additive to 25% additive. Reaper's Sacrifice upgrade. Shadow damage increased from 15% multiplicative up to 20% multiplicative. Shadow Mage's Sacrifice upgrade. Maximum essence increased from 15 to 20. Now also increases essence generation by 20%. Cold Mage's Sacrifice upgrade. Damage to vulnerable enemies increased from 15% multiplicative to 20% multiplicative. Bone Mage's Sacrifice upgrade. Overpower damage increased from 25% multiplicative to 30% multiplicative. Bone Golem Sacrifice upgrade. The attack speed bonus was increased from 10% additive to 15%. Bone Golem Sacrifice upgrade. Maximum life bonus increased from 10% multiplicative to 15% multiplicative. Iron Golem Sacrifice upgrade. Crit Strike damage bonus increased from 30% multiplicative to 35% multiplicative. Paragon time. Blood Begets Blood, legendary node. Maximum damage increased from 15% multiplicative to 30% multiplicative. Blood Drinker glyph. Fortify bonus increased from 7% to 10% of your max life. Desecration glyph. Shadow damage bonus increased from 15% multiplicative to 20% multiplicative. Gravekeeper glyph. Damage bonus increased from 2% multiplicative to 3% multiplicative up to a maximum of 12% multiplicative to 18% multiplicative for every close corpse. That's kind of cool. Legendary aspects. Sacrificial aspect. Sacrifice bonus increased from 10 to 25% multiplicative to 35 to 50% multiplicative. Shielding Storm aspect. Previously, each time that the Bone Storm damages an enemy, gain a barrier equal to 1 to 6% of your base life for 10 seconds. Now, each time that Bone Storm damages an enemy, gain a barrier equal to 1 to 6% of your maximum life for 10 seconds. So now it's maximum life. Okay. Rogue time. It's rogue time. I'm very curious. Twisting Blades. Initial damage increased by 20%. Return damage increased by 20%. Okay, so Twisting Blades may come back. Flurry. Damage increased by approximately 25%. And then the passives. Exposure. Lucky Hit no longer requires direct damage to proc, and will now also work on DOT effects. Sturdy. Damage reduction increased from 4 to 8 to 12% to 6 to 12 to 18%. That's going to help in the pit a bit. Mending Obscurity. Previously, while stealthed, you heal for 4 to 8 to 12% max life per second. Now, when entering stealth and every second while stealth, you heal for 5 to 10 to 15% of your maximum life. Once again, the description was more specific, so you really know what's going on with these passives. Paragon time. Versatility glyph. Your non-basic and non-core skill damage increased from 15% multiplicative to 25% multiplicative. Fluidity glyph. Previously, when you cast an agility skill, you gain 9% multiplicative increased energy regen for 6 seconds. Now, when you cast an agility skill, you deal 10% multiplicative increased damage and gain 15% increased energy regen for 6 seconds, and that is multiplicative. The explosive glyph. Damage reduction increased from 10% multiplicative to 15% multiplicative. Diminish glyph. Damage reduction increased from 10% to 15%. Rogue's going to be a little bit tankier. Okay. Blade Dancer's aspect. Damage increased from 30 to 60% multiplicative to 50 to 80% multiplicative. Aspect of Artful Initiative. Energy required to drop grenades reduced from 100 to 75. And grenade damage increased by 50%. Aspect of Surprise. Grenade damage increased by 200%. When using Shadow Step, grenades now drop at the location the player teleports to instead of where they teleported from. I like that a lot. This only changes where the grenades drop when using Shadow Step and not Evade. Shadow Step only. Trickster's aspect. Grenade damage increased by 50%, and Shrouding aspect. Time required for a Dark Shroud reduced from 3 seconds down to 2 seconds. I like that. Umbrous aspect. Previously, a lucky hit would state that crit strikes with marksman skills have up to 45 to 60% chance to grant a free Dark Shroud Shadow. Now, your lucky hit says crit strikes have up to a 45 to 60% chance to grant a free Dark Shroud Shadow. So instead of marksman skills specifically, just crit strikes. That's nice. Aspect of Arrow Storms. Arrow Storm damage increased by 30%. Will Arrow Storm top the leaderboards? Bonus damage dealt by all arrow storms increased from 25% to 35% multiplicative to 30 to 40% multiplicative. An then vengeful aspect. Your arrow storm damage will be increased by 30%. This is interesting. I like how they are buffing things that nobody really cared about anymore. They were like, wow, this is worthless. Now we have a chance to test it again and a lot of motive. Unique items. Eyes in the dark. Previously, Death Trap dealt 50 to 70% multiplicative increased damage unless it hits a boss of player. Death Trap will continue to rearm itself until it kills an enemy. Sure. Now, Death Trap will deal 50 to 90% multiplicative increased damage and will rearm itself a second time. Saboteur's Signet? Grenade damage increased by 50%. Alright. Sorcerer, please buff Frozen Orb Conjuration, please. Okay. Ice Armor. Barrier amount increased from 30% of base life to 25% of max life. Yes. Shimmering Teleport. Duration increased from 3 to 4 seconds. Okay. Incinerate. Damage reduction increased from 15% to 20%. So passive time. Potent Warding. Maximum resistance increased from 1 to 2 to 3% to 2 to 4 to 6%. I like that. Adjusted functionality no longer excludes basic skill casts. Glass Cannon. Additional damage taken. Reduced from 3 to 6 to 9% multiplicative to 2 to 4 to 6%. So go for Glass Cannon. If you're a sorc, I don't care what you're building. Go for a Glass Cannon. Yes. Align the elements. Persistence duration increased from 2 to 3 seconds. Conduction. Movement speed increased from 3 to 6 to 9% additive to 4 to 8 to 12% additive. Duration increased from 3 to 4 seconds. Electrocution. Reduced enemy damage dealt increased from 5 to 10 to 15% multiplicative to 6 to 12 to 18% multiplicative. Warmth. Healing per nearby enemy increased from 0.3 to 0.6 to 0.9% to 0.5 to 1 to 1.5%. Healing per nearby burning boss enemy increased from 0.6 to 1.2 to 1.8% to 2 to 4 to 6%. Thank you. They're getting rid of the decimals. No, I'm kidding. This is good. This is an increase. Inner Flames. Bonus damage while healing. Jeez. Bonus damage while healthy increased from 3 to 6 to 9% multiplicative to 4 to 8 to 12% multiplicative. Yes. Overflowing energy. Cooldown reduction from hitting elite enemies increased from 0.25 to 0.35 seconds. Ooh, that'll add up. Avalanche. Bonus damage increased from 45% multiplicative to 60% multiplicative. Combustion. Bonus damage per unique source of burning increased from 2% multiplicative to 4% multiplicative. Isu's Ferocity. Crit strike chance increased from 5% additive to 10% additive. They doubled that. Shatter. Bonus damage increased from 25% multiplicative to 30% multiplicative. Oh gosh. Veer's Mastery. Bonus damage increased from 15% multiplicative to 20% multiplicative. Bonus damage after a critical strike increased from 20% multiplicative to 25% multiplicative. Legendary aspects. Frozen Orb, please. Give us something. Aspect of Concentration. Okay. Damage reduction increased from 10 to 20% to 15 to 25%. Okay. Aspect of Unbroken Tether. Additional Chain Lightning chains increased from 4 to 5. Aspect of Overwhelming Currents. Chance to cast an additional shock skill increased from 15 to 30% to 25 to 40%. Mage Lord's Aspect. Previously, Veer's Mastery grants 6 to 9% damage reduction for each close enemy up to 18 to 27%. Okay. Now, Veer's Mastery grants 6 to 9% damage reduction, tripled while fighting a close enemy. So instead of up to, it is just automatically tripled. It hits this real quick rather than, oh, per enemy. Okay. Aspect of Shattered Stars. Meteorite damage increased from 20 to 35% multiplicative to 30 to 45% multiplicative. Meatball build win. Aspect of Frozen Memories. Additional casts increased from 1 to 2. Battlecaster's Aspect. Maximum stacks increased from 3 to 5. Unique items. Flame Scar. Ember's damage increased by about 35% approximately. Isidora's Overflowing Cameo. Damage increased for every 100 int, increased from 50% multiplicative to 60% multiplicative. Staff of Endless Rage. Bonus damage increased from 40 to 60% multiplicative to 50 to 70% multiplicative. Gloves of the Illuminator. Damage penalty reduced from 35 to 25% multiplicative to 30% to 20% multiplicative. Okay. We could see some changes, especially with the damage reduction. I'm very excited for this. All right. End game. Health and damage levels have been reduced in the pit. The adjustment is most significant as players approach tier 60, so more players can fully participate in masterworking. Yes, because once we get these lower builds that aren't meta or whatever, you know, especially with these changes, we're going to really see what they look like fully masterwork. Because a lot of people were like, I don't even want to push in the pit. This is tedious. I can't efficiently farm these materials because I just can't sustain or I can't do damage. So this sounds a lot more accessible, and I'm really appreciating that. Developers note, we're adjusting the pit so more players can enjoy a smoother endgame progression experience. I like that. All tormented bosses have had their health reduced by 30%. This includes blood boils from Tormented Echo of Lilith. Thank you! I spend way too much time on these stupid blood boils, and I also want to one-shot Duriel even faster as a Necromancer. Bug fixes. Fixed an issue where Holy Bolt's elixir damage was scaling unintentionally high when it was triggered from pets, such as Necromancer's minions. No! They caught us! Endo. I blame Endo. No. Dev's note. Holy Bolt's elixir now deals a percentage of your weapon damage rather than percentage of the enemy's health. Darn, it's working as intended now. This change is intended to reduce its effectiveness against the toughest enemies in higher tiers of the pit, but will still be really valuable for players throughout the whole game. We made this change alongside a reduction to the health of enemies in the pit, so players who are delving deep into the pit aren't heavily affected. That was my biggest worry, was if they nerfed Holy Bolt, we're all screwed because Holy Bolt is doing this much damage where our builds are just slowly chunking down that health bar. So it sounds like with that 30% reduction, we're going to be actually making a difference. So Frozen Orb could come back. I'm going to be testing that as soon as this patch is live. Fixed an issue where casting boulders with Dolmen Stone would cause it to not cast at all. Boulders now have a limit of 10, but their damage is increased by 10% for each boulder. Yay. Fixed an issue. Rapid fire with Scoundrel's Kiss equipped couldn't properly hit close targets and could sometimes fire projectiles behind the player. This also increases the radius of the explosion by 25%. Okay. Fix an issue where pets are being counted as minions. They want to shut us down. We're just trying to get pets to save the game. And now they caught on. No, it's okay. All right, well, what did you guys think of the patch notes? Please let me know in the comments. I was super excited reading all of these. If you couldn't tell, like, I'm ecstatic here. I'm really... Oh, this is a lot of fun. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to like, subscribe, drop a comment, share it, get the word out. I want to be doing more Diablo videos like this. You guys take care, and I will see you later. Goodbye.